Good afternoon guys, this is Asteroid here and welcome to the official walkthrough video for my brand new track Free on Nocturnal Knights. The purpose of this video is to take a look at what kind of elements it takes to build a track like Free in order to secure those top label signings and to get your tracks supported on radio shows like Future Sound of Egypt and A State of Trance. Okay, so I have the project open here. Before we start guys, this is the MIDI version of the project, which isn't quite as tight as the final mixdown, which I always bounce to audio for. So I've kept it in MIDI versions so that we can go through the elements together and you can still see the processing. In the audio version, of course, everything is flattened to audio and therefore the plug-in chains are removed. So I'll show you this version, but just to note, it's not quite as tight as what the final version was. Okay. Starting with the top channel, and we'll make our way down through the channels. So the top one is a short bass stab. It was from Serum, which I then bounced to audio. It sounds like this. You can hear it periodically throughout the track, and it sounds like that. It's mainly a cool bass stab with heavy reverb just to kind of add some character to the transitions. As you can see here, I've just got a bit of a low cut EQ. I'm scooping a little bit out the low mids as well and then accentuating the high end, which is mainly to help the reverb brightness later on in the chain. Saturated just to warm things up. Again, another low cut after that. Some Haas effect delay just to push the width a little bit. Then quite a long reverb, tail of 8.5 decay and around 60% wet. Some mid-side EQ, mid-side processing rather, just to pull the mid down a little bit, the mono signal down a bit. Also the compressor to tighten things up, and then another one to sidechain against the kick. All right, so moving on to the sub and mid channels now. So I group the subs together and the mids together, and then I create another group that I call subs and mids. So let's have a look at the subs first, and then we'll work our way back up to the group channel. So the subs channel, I've just got a very, very minor amount of glue compression going on here, and then a utility function afterwards for mono. That's just in case any processing adds any side information during the channels or groups. So the kick and the sub relationship sounds like this. This is it filtered obviously for the build up, and then so that's the full kick and sub relationship. Now looking at the kick, as you can see with the kick drum, I'm using quite a heavily processed sample already, and therefore I've just taken a little scoop out around 150 Hertz for that kind of boxy or muddy area. And then I've just boosted the top end from 2500 Hertz upwards just by 1 dB, just to give it a little bit of brightness and bring out the attack or click. I've also shortened the kick sample. You know, the original sample was this long, and I've just brought the clip fade in a little bit there, just to give a little bit more space to the sub regions. Okay. So barely anything on the kick itself. The sub, which sounds like this. So on the sub, I've got I think everybody uses this on their sub bass nowadays. I've just got a frequency 51. I felt like that's where the sweet spot was, and I've given the intensity a little push just up to -14. I've put this instance before the EQ, just so that we can then EQ out any additional harmonics this may add further up in the low, mid or mid region. So I'm rolling off here at 40 Hertz. I've got a little scoop out around 116, and then rolling off around 200 Hertz. Then I've got this kind of LFO tool shape, and that's just to get rid of this tail here to avoid any bleed into the kick. I've just got a utility function here just for gain, for volume automation, gain staging. And then I've just got the Oscillus Megascope, and that's just to keep an eye on things afterwards, so I can see what my sub relationship is like. As you can see in the MIDI clip, let me just move this up here. In the MIDI clip, one of the notes does go over into the second quarter note. Let me just change this to quarter note. So it goes over into the second quarter note. So, you know, a lot of people would think, well, isn't that going to conflict with your, you know, the front of the second kick? But of course, with the LFO tool shape that I've got in place, it then removes that. Basically, I could have just done this. But just to be extra safe, I've used the LFO tool shape, which gives me this shorter note here to stop any bleed into the kick. That's just to stop the bleed into the kick there. All right, so going back to kick and sub relationship. So I'm just going to solo the kick and sub group here. And I'm going to show you what the glue compression is doing. As you can see here, it's quite a difference because there is a little bit of a makeup gain here, almost 4 dB. But as you can see, the gain reduction is just a couple of decibels. And it's really just to bring the kick and the sub together, glue them together, make them sound almost like they're just one sound. Just to add cohesion across the low end. And then going to the mid basses. It's a patch from Spire. I'm just running off 111 hertz here, sorry. I'll play you this one in context as well, just so you can hear it on its own. So as you can hear, there's a heavy use of delay on these. Black box distortion, crystal clear to clean up a bit. So this is how the patch sounds with just the low cut. With black box distortion. Really warms things up there, but it also adds a little bit of cloudiness or muddiness in the low mid region. So I'm just using crystal clear to clean that up. That's it. The bass pattern is the exact same pattern as the sub bass. Just pulled the MIDI clip down into this channel. And then the second one is something a little bit brighter. Again, here I'm using the black box distortion and crystal clear to remove some mud, but also with an additional EQ cut around 450 hertz just to create a little bit of space for mid one, and also to remove a little bit of mud as well. So the black box distortion and crystal clear is really what's, you know, doing all of the work there. But if we have a look at the mid channel here, the mid group, I also then have a slight transient extraction compressor just to make those transients pop a little bit, just to give it a bit more bite. I've got a little bit of an EQ boost here, 2,500 hertz, 3 dB, just to bring out some brightness, and then quite a heavy delay. This is so initially I added the delay just because I felt like, you know, the bass line was a bit too stagnant otherwise, the mid bass. And also adding this this delay in, it's just given a little bit of space to it's filling up the gaps that are created by the spaces in the fact that the bass line is based on groove rather than, you know, a rolling bass line. So it does have gaps, and the purpose of the delay was to fill those gaps up and make it feel like it's flowing a bit more. All right, so that's the subs and the mids group that we've discussed there. So if I go to the subs and mids group, I have nothing crazy going on here, just endless smile for transitional work. Utility, again, just gain reduction going into transitions, and then high pass and low pass filter as well. Okay, so let's move on to, let's collapse these down so we know where we're at. All right, so moving on to mid sequences. So I have a mid sequence group, again, slight transient extraction preset from Pro C. And then I've got I'm rolling off with quite a steep slope low cut at 150. And then I've got a limiter in place just to keep things in check. And LFO tool again, just for some slight volume shaping or sidechain if you like. So this is what the sequence sounds like on its own. As you can hear, these aren't really doing a great deal. It's very, very subtle, but it's just a case of tightening up, you know, removing any additional low mid content from here, and the limiter just to keep things in check where it's quite dynamic. I know what you're thinking, boost the dynamics, essentially boosting the transients, but yeah, then taming them afterwards. I just like how it sounds, I like the character, and just to keep things nice and balanced. And that with the kick, subs, and mids sounds like this, and it creates that groove that you know from the track. Cool. So that's the mid sequences. Usually I tend to have more than one mid sequence, hence the group. Sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 sequences, and they'll be working together to create a groove for the mids. Moving on to percussion, I don't do anything crazy with percussion. As you can see here, the group just has a Synalxis creative filter for the transitions, a limiter, and then if we look at the individual, so I've got some techno hats in here that sound like this. So all I've done here is a low cut at 300 Hertz, a little Haas effect EQ just to boost the width a little bit, and then I've got just a very typical drum room send, 1.22 decay, 100% dry wet on send D, and I'm just sending -10 dBs to that just to give it a bit of space. So without. With, so that's just again, just to give it its own space in the mix. Closed hats. Just a low cut from 500 Hertz, a little bit of sidechain for rhythm, and then some additional auto panning as well, just to make it move a bit in the mix, and to create a little bit of space for the hats as well when they come in. There we go. And claps are pretty standard too. I have a clap group. So the claps on their own, they just have a roll off around 880. I think it's the same on both. Yeah, same EQ on both. And then a slight boost, slight resonant boost here at 1.26 kilohertz, around about 3 dB, just to bring out the presence of the clap, and a tiny little high end boost as well on both claps. So without the group effects, it sounds like this. So just adding some mid-range saturation, some fresh air from Slate Digital, just to bring out the brightness a bit, some parallel compression, just pulls them together a little bit, gives them a bit more snap as well. And then just a very slight scoop out of here, just because obviously they hit with a kick. Every second kick is the clap. Just to scoop out that tiny little bit at the front there, just to give a little bit of room to the kick. Keep things in check a little bit more. And after the claps, we then are looking at the loops. So on the loops, I'm just going to take these off as well, so you can hear what they're doing. So I just have a left and right loop here. I kept the percussion pretty stripped back in this one. Usually I'll have 3 or 4 loops plus what you can see up here. So I've got one pan 25 left that sounds like this. One that's pan 25 right that sounds like this. Together. Just to create a little bit of a techie groove more than anything. And the reason that I am rolling off the top end here is because I want to leave plenty of space for my closed hats and techno hats. So yeah, I've just rolled off the top here at around 9,000 roughly on both, and then rolled off the bottom around 300 Hertz as well. This is just to contain them in the middle essentially, and push them in the back of the mix a little bit. So in context with, let me just play the group first. All right, so that's how the loops sound on their own. bit of satin saturation to warm it up. Parallel compression, LFO tool for movement, just a little bit of ducking, tiny bit. And then the track spacer, I've got one is sent to the claps and one is sent to the techno hats, and that's just to create a little bit more space between the elements. So if we listen to all of the percussion together, as you can hear, it just creates a little bit of space between the claps, the techno hats, and the loops then. Alright, so on all percussion then, as I mentioned earlier, I just have the filter and the limiters just to keep things in check. So if we listen to the bass short, the subs and mids, mid sequences in percussion, it sounds like this. Okay, snares, what can I really tell you about snares? Snares are snares, right? Not doing anything crazy, by the way. It's just a cool snare effects build, probably from one of the Dave Parkinson packs. I know, everybody says you shouldn't use them, or everybody uses them, but I don't make music to impress producers. That's a nice byproduct if you can, but I don't make music to impress producers. I make music for people to dance to. And never in 25 years of being involved with music have I been on a dance floor and somebody turned to me and say, "Hey Matt, can you hear that? They've used the snare from Dave Parkinson Trance Essentials too." It's never happened. So yeah, I'm not really bothered about using stuff like this. If it sounds good, it works in the track, go for it. And yeah, don't worry too much about that stuff. So yeah, I think it's a Dave Parkinson sample. And I just rolled off around 100 hertz there. That's it. Nothing crazy. Yeah, so in the snare build, I'm not even, sometimes I'll volume automate or, you know, add some filtering or whatever just to smooth them out, but it just doesn't need it in this case. So moving on to the intro pluck. Okay, so this one I had to pull from the audio version, the final mixdown, because I added a new plugin at the final mix. So this was actually being played by a different synth sound previously. So in order for it to sound like the finished version, I've pulled it in from the audio track. From the audio version of the pre-master. Yeah, I've done that with a couple of elements, by the way, because I tend to make everything in MIDI, then duplicate a project, and then bounce everything to audio. But of course, in the processing of the audio mixdown, I sometimes, you know, change plucks or change sounds that I don't like for new sounds in that area, which wouldn't be in the previous MIDI project. So that's why you'll see some audio. Okay, guys. So yeah, just a typical sine wave pluck. Quite simple notes as well. You can find this anywhere. Spire, I think it was from, and it reminds me a little bit of that sort of PPK Resurrection sort of sound. I guess it's more on those lines. If I remember rightly, I wasn't doing anything crazy. I think I added some saturation from Thermal's output, just to warm things up a little bit, and a low cut EQ around 200 hertz if I remember correctly, and also then I rolled off the top a little bit as well, just to contain it in the mix a little bit. And this plays throughout. Okay, so moving on to the distorted acid sequence. This was, okay, yeah. So this was another one I added later on in the mixdown process, and I think I may have even removed the initial sine pluck from here and just used it for the hits in the intro, if I remember rightly. I'm not 100% sure. But the distorted acid sequence was, it was from a psytrance from a psytrance pack in Serum, or bank in Serum, sorry. It just sounds like this. It's following the same pattern here as the intro pluck, same notes, but I switched that out for this distorted pluck sound. And then EQ, yeah, low cut EQ around 150 to 200 hertz, pretty standard. I do have a track spacer on here, but I don't remember what it was sent to. I think it was sent to the 303, but I don't remember at this point. Okay, so moving on to the vocals. You can hear them throughout the track, of course.
It feels like heaven.
Okay guys, so many will be surprised to know that it's not Audrey Gallagher. I know on the ASOS show, Armin and Ruben said that it sounded like it was Audrey Gallagher. It's not. This is actually just from a sample pack, possibly even Splice if I remember correctly, which is quite surprising because it's a great quality sample, and if you don't mind sifting through loads of crap, then sample packs can be a really good source of vocal content. I've just got 150 hertz cut here. I'm adding fresh air again from Slate, just for some brightness.
So free. It feels like heaven.
Listening to it now, it's almost too bright with this on, so I may have actually just cut back on this a little bit. I don't remember in the final mix. Then I've got some saturation from the Magic Mastering. Okay, yeah, so this is actually from the FabFilter Saturn 1 presets. When I installed Saturn 2, I actually copied the preset folder from Saturn 1 and dumped it in the Saturn 2 folder for presets as well, so that I kept the old ones as well. So this is from Magic Mastering in there, just to add some warmth.
So free. It feels like heaven.
Here I've just got a multi-band compression, and it's only working in one area. The band is working around 457 hertz. I just felt like there was a bit too much weight in this area on the vocal originally, especially when played in context with everything else. So I'm just ducking a little bit in that area there. Just some multi-band distortion, and single band focused, and then quite a heavy reverb. I'm actually using the piano huge ambience preset from Temple One Reverb Essentials. It's a piano reverb, but I just really like that big lush reverb for the vocals. And in context with the rest of the track, it sounds like this.
It feels like heaven. Forever, forever, forever. Forever, forever. So feels like
Okay, so the additional vocal channel is the same processing up until the delay. I've just added this delay just to give it a little bit of ping pong effect where it bounces from left to right as the leads open fully. So that's the only difference there. Okay, moving on to the 303 stabs. Did I? Yeah, okay, cool. Couldn't see them for a minute there. So the 303 stabs sound like this. Okay, and they are derived from the main synth 303, just obviously stabs with the filter opening a little bit. I'll show you the processing for those 303s in a second. Here we go. So this is the main 303. So that's the main 303 from the synth. I'm using the TB303 from Roland Cloud. I've just got some pedal distortion on there just to really bring out the character a bit. Mainly to bring out the treble and just add some bite as well. As you can hear, it makes quite a bit of difference even on 50% wet. Some filtering just for later on, some OTT, multiband compression, multiband dynamics. Again, just to bring out, just to push that distortion a little bit further. Here I've got a low cut EQ at 150, a tiny little dip in the mid-range around 1000, and then a little boost at 3000 roughly at 1.5 dB. A little bit of compression afterwards, and then obviously sidechain compression for when it plays with the kick. So once I was happy with that, by the way, I just inserted an audio channel, changed it to resampling mode and recorded it into audio so that I can manipulate it further. And then on the audio version, I've just added a limiter and some delay as well just for these transition areas here. So for you to hear it how it sounds, I'm just going to disable the MIDI version again and play it in audio. Okay, so that's the 303 covered. And then with the reverse 303, I've just used this as a way to introduce, in fact, maybe we should put them there. I've used these as a way to introduce the forward-facing 303 stabs. It's literally just, all I've done was, I think I took the first hit of this acid here, this 303. I pumped up the reverb and then recorded the tail and then reversed it. You get this effect. And it's just something to introduce those 303 stabs. Again, nothing crazy. A little bit of sidechain compression here to duck under the kick. And then moving on to the ARP next. Okay, right, so this ARP is actually the counter melody that comes in the second part of the main drop. So with this ARP, that was it was a patch in Spire. I think it may have even been possibly from a Meta and Glide Bank, maybe. So didn't design that sound either. And by the way, guys, just for reference, I use presets a lot, but I usually tend to not use them the way I found them. So I'll always try and do something different. You know, I'll even try and add some granular effects like Portal from output, or even multi-stage distortion from output again, called thermal. Just trying to change the characteristic of the sound so it doesn't sound exactly as I found them, and even tweaking some of the oscillator parameters inside the synth as well, just to get your own kind of flavor. I can design some sounds, but I'm not as proficient as I'd like to be just yet, so I do tend to use presets as a starting point and either reverse engineer or just change the character myself. Just to give you some context on why I keep mentioning which banks I use. Okay, so moving on to pads. Here I've got 3 pads layered. One is Spire, the second one is Spire, the third one is Spire. The EQ curves look a little like this. So layer 1, just removing most of the low and low mids. What am I running off at here? 229 hertz roughly, with a slight resonant bump in the mid-range here, just for a bit of warmth. The second one I'm running off even further up. I'm going up as far as 258 hertz roughly, with a slight dip around the sensitive hearing area, which is, what is that exactly? It's 6.23, so 6,200 hertz roughly. And then the super saw pad, I'm adding a bit more mid-range here, but then tailing off as we get towards the upper and the high end, upper mids and high end. Then I'm adding the Apex Vintage Exciter, and that's for, it's basically a harmonic exciter, and so you can hear what it does. It does this. Just really brings things out a little bit in the mid-range and in the high end as well. Then I'm sending it to my pad reverb send, which is this one here. I'm not going to go too much into this, guys, but if you're interested, then I've done a whole video on lead and pad reverb sends, so you can go and check that out in your own time. That's for this lead send and this pad send here as well. But just for your reference, if you do watch that video, you can then know that I'm sending minus 25 dB to the pad send and minus 20 dB to the widening send as well. Again, all covered in that video. Okay, so next we're moving on to the sub pad. It's just a simple patch in Spire with a high cut of 200 hertz. So I'm high cutting all the top end away down to 200 hertz. That's literally it. I'm not doing anything crazy there. So that's the pads together. And then with the leads, most people are quite surprised to know this, but this is literally just 2 layers. I think it's the first time ever that I've only used 2 layers, actually. So it's one heavily detuned layer in Serum, which sounds like this on its own. Quite thick, quite heavily detuned, and then the Spire layer is this one. Has a lot more reverb on that one, it just adds a little bit more atmosphere, and both of them together sound like this. So on both layers, I'm low cutting around 100 hertz, just here at the moment. But I think in the mixdown project, I left a little bit more low end in for the breakdown, just so they sound nice and thick, which is a really cool trick, by the way, guys. You can do that with a reverb outside of the rack as well. You know, I'll tend to leave more low end in here. This is on 80 hertz, and then I'll just, as the build happens, I will automate it over time. The low cut, where is it? It's this one. So I'll automate the low cut over time to come all the way up to 250, and then just before the drop back down to 200, just to leave space for your kick and bass elements. But I like to leave quite a lot of the low mid and low end in for the breakdown, just to give the illusion of the leads sounding much bigger than they actually are in the drop. You know, you're not going to miss that. You're not going to miss the 200 hertz cut here, because of course your kick, sub and mid basses will take up that area anyway. That's a really, really nice trick to make them sound, you know, much bigger and much fuller in the breakdown. So to go through the processing of each, I've just got a low cut EQ on both layers. Then outside of the rack, I've got a subtle stereo enhancer in Pro Q3. I know what you're thinking. Why are you boosting the left and right signal on the low end? It doesn't make sense as it is. But of course, we've got the low cut afterwards, so that's negligible anyway. So you can even just turn those off if you wanted to. It's just to give a little bit more, spaciousness to the highs. Then I've got the just a lead warmth preset for the Ableton Saturator. I've got some EQ cuts here, so I'm just removing a little bit of a harsh frequency around 284, another one at 2.67 hertz, 2600, and then giving a little boost around the brightness area, presence area around 8000, and then rolling off the top at 18,000. Then I've got some dynamic EQ processes here, just to remove some harsh areas. And then, just a simple delay. So I've offset the times. One is on 4/16, the other is 6/16. No ping pong this time. LFO tool just for sidechain, so automated just purely for the drop only. And that shape looks like this, if you want to see a bit more. Please note as well, guys, if you're gonna use LFO tool for sidechaining, make sure you pull the volume down. At 100, it pumps far too much, so pull it down. I usually find the sweet spot is around anywhere between 30 and 48 on the volume. A little bit of compression afterwards for leveling. I've got the Arts Acoustic Reverb. Again, it's not such a big decay time as the leads. Making sure the quality is on ultra as well, and about minus 12% wet. Then I've got track spacer going to the vocals and to the 303 audio, just to create space between all the elements, and just a volume automation as well for transitions. Quite surprised that it's only 2 layers myself. They just sounded big enough for the track as it were. With the sub pad and with the leads and everything else, and the pads and the vocal, it already sounded full enough in the mix. But that's quite nice to only use 2 layers for once. Usually I get away with like 4 to 6, but it was really nice to only use 2. All right, going into the effects region now. This was just an acid, but with Tantra added, I believe. So just heavily delayed. It's got massive feedback, so the tail is carrying on for quite a long time. Bit of saturation to warm it up, very light EQ, mainly cuts, and some reverb. But I did run it through DS Chef's Tantra 2 plugin from Plugin Alliance to give it some character. Impacts or sub booms, I haven't even EQ'd that at all. But one thing to note, if you have any kicks going into any breakdowns or transition mini breaks, if you have your kick playing at the same time as your impact, be sure to sidechain it against the kick so you don't get any clashing. That's a really nice tip as well. More often than not, I get demos all the time, and forever the impacts are clashing with a kick or with a crash or whatever. So just be sure to be mindful of bass elements playing at the same time as each other, and making sure that there's enough space for them to play in their own way. Just got some tonal reverse effects here that sound like this. That's it, just tonal reverses, and we've got low cut at 300 there. Not even EQ in the cool up effects, whatever that was. Uplifters, white noise sweeps basically. So these uplifters, look, there's no processing on them, not even EQ. This downlifter, or down sweep if you like, has got a little bit of an EQ cut, removing quite a bit from the low mids and mid range, and added a bit of reverb there as well. Sorry, didn't mean to hit the space bar then, guys. So just a little bit of reverb for the down sweep there as well. This down sweep I've compressed a little bit because it's a little bit dynamic. So just to keep that in check, the cool down effects, I've got my gain staging rack in there, but I didn't actually do anything to it. Pretty simple laser type sound. Okay, risers. Risers are volume automated this time. Oh no, actually they're panned. I beg your pardon, they're panned here. So they're going from left to right over time. I thought maybe they would be volume automated as well. They're not, I don't believe. Nope, just panned. All right, cool. So the riser, the first riser has no processing at all, and the second riser doesn't either. Okay, so on the risers group, there's just a little bit of compression to tie them together. And they just pan left to right over time. And that's that for the risers. And then we just got some short atmospheric sounds. No EQ, no treatment. Long atmosphere. So this one I've got a low cut at 162 Hertz. I've got reverb to push it in the back of the mix a bit. I've got this flanger on it as well, just to give it some. Just to give it some character and a bit of movement. And then LFO tool to sidechain. Nothing crazy, guys. Crashes then, I've got some reverb, obviously low cut EQ even, not IQ. A little bit of a dip in the top end as well, just to remove any harshness. And some compression to go with it. And then I have this sidechained atmosphere here. It's just auto-panned, and it's just to run alongside the kick and basses to create some atmosphere. A little bit of reverb. I say a little bit, there's quite a high decay time and it's on 100%, so it's quite low. But it's also auto-panned and side-chained as well there. And then I'm just pushing the side information by 2 dB as well. Okay, so that's it, guys. That's pretty much the full track. As you can see, you don't need hundreds of channels. This is a 50 channel track, and that's including the additional acids. So 50 channels, and that's it. Bear in mind, some of them are grouped. So for example, the pads are 3 layers, but it'll count as 1 channel because it's just in 1 channel, but there are 3 layers here. So it's probably around 60 channels total. So you don't need to be going, 100, 150 channel and going crazy with details to make a really big track. This one speaks for itself. Sorry, I'm trying to say that without sounding like an egoic arsehole. But what I'm trying to say is, it's signed to a very well-respected label. It's had huge support. It went top 5 on Beatport, so it's performed really well as a track, and I'm super proud of it. And it's just proof that you don't need to be overly complex. And you don't need to be, using 100, 150 channels per track in order to create something great. At the end of the day, like I said, I'm not making music to impress other producers. I'm making it for people to listen to, enjoy, and dance to. For me, it's more about less channels, but bigger elements. So getting the most out of each individual sound. I would much rather have 5 or 6 really fat core elements than 100 really tiny thin ones and then struggle with a mix down later as well. But let that be your guide. It depends what kind of music you're making, of course. Obviously tech trance has a lot more in the way of crazy effects and things like that, so you're going to breach 100 channels easy with that stuff. But just some food for thought. Nothing has to be overly complex. Solid vocal, nice melody, big solid kick and basses. That's pretty much all you really need to create a memorable track. Hope the insight has been good for you. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, because there will be more walkthroughs, tech tips, and free videos going up soon as well. Thanks again for watching, and hopefully I will see you somewhere soon. Peace.